Hello everyone, this is a small presentation on orbital implants and also I'll be talking about contracted socket. Let's first go through the history of orbital implants. In 1583, George Bartish first described the procedure of removal of eye for the treatment of certain ocular diseases. The anophthalmic socket was left behind as it is, rendering it unsuitable for implant. Then was introduced glass sphere into the eviscerated eye by Phillips Henry Mules in 1885, which is known as Mule sphere. This was a milestone in ophthalmic surgery. In 1887, Frost inserted similar hollow glass sphere in Tennant's capsule post-enucleation. This concept of orbital implants was a major breakthrough in anophthalmic socket surgery. Mule sphere began to be used extensively along with the search for better implant material. The problem was that the implant, even though it replaced the lost orbital volume, but it had a tendency to migrate within tissues and even sometimes extruded out of the cone. Implants progressed from non-integrated to partially integrated to integrated implants. Rudman in 1941 introduced the first exposed integrated implant and an acrylic prosthesis. Cutler developed a partial exposed integrated implant similar to Iowa implant. These implants did have excellent motility, but infection and extrusion were common complications. Then it was Allen who discovered a buried non-spherical polymethyl methacrylate or PMMA implant, an implant that has been placed within the anophthalmic socket with an overlying closed, smooth, uninterrupted conjunctival surface, completely covering the anophthalmic implant. Now let's see how an ideal implant should be. An implant should be able to mimic globe, should be able to replace sufficient volume but allow prosthesis of adequate AC depth, should have minimal rate of exposure, extrusion and infection, should be non-antigenic, biologically inert, should provide socket mobility transfer to prosthesis, should be completely buried, simple in construction, lightweight, which can be integrated into extraocular muscles, orbital soft tissue without adhesions, and should be affordable. Orbital implants can be non-integrated, integrated, semi-integrated, bio-integrated, or biogenic. Non-integrated orbital implants do not allow direct or indirect integration with orbital structures or with prosthesis. Commonly used non-integrated implants are PMMA and silicon spheres. The advantages of using non-integrated are they are inexpensive, technically uncomplicated, well tolerated with fewer complications, they have smooth surface, wrapping can be done in sclera and attaching extraocular muscle to sclera is easy. They do not allow for fibrovascular ingrowth. But the disadvantage is that it delivers poor motility if not wrapped. Semi-integrated allow indirect integration with orbital structure but not with prosthesis. Commonly used semi-integrated implants are Allen, Iowa, Universal and Castrovillo. Advantages of using semi-integrated are good motility. They are also inexpensive. Disadvantages are that the anterior surface is irregular, therefore conjunctiva and tenon are pinched between implant and prosthesis. There is a lot of discomfort to the patient. There is high rate of erosion and extrusion. Customized prostheses are required to fit its shape. Bio-integrated allow fibrovascular ingrowth of orbital tissue for full integration. They are porous. Examples are hydroxyapatite implant, porous polyethylene implant, aluminium oxide implant, alpha sphere. Advantage of using this implant is that it can be directly coupled to the overlying prosthetic eye with a PEG system. We'll see what a PEG system is in a while. The disadvantage of using this is that it is expensive and not very easily available. A biogenic implant is an autograft or allograft of natural tissue with direct biological integration with orbital structures but not with prosthesis. Examples include dermis fat graft and mucus graft. This is an example of dermis fat graft which can be seen, which is obtained from a body part and inserted into the orbit. Newer and commonly used implants are hydroxyapatite, porous polyethylene, aluminium oxide, expandable implants, and alpha sphere. Hydroxyapatite implant after enucleation and evisceration was introduced by Perry in 1985. It consists of pores resembling Hawaiian system of normal lamellar bone. Derived from coral, this implant is a natural substance mainly comprising of calcium phosphate. Porous implants favor fibrovascular ingrowths and this decreases the late extrusion and migration of implants. Hydroxyapatite implants soon became popular as they have good motility even after being integrated implants. A good structural framework also supported pegging. Due to the rough surface, brittle nature, hydroxyapatite implants needed different wrapping material. The various materials used for wrapping are polygalactin mesh, donor sclera, fascia lata, temporalis fascia, etc. Now let's see what PEG is. PEG allows direct coupling of the implant movement to an overlying prosthesis. It helps hold weight of artificial eye, which reduces downward push on lower eyelid and prevents drooping of lower eyelid. PEGs may be inserted within sleeves that are drilled into the anterior aspect of the implant. It is made of titanium. Hydroxyapatite implant is available as bio-eye implant. It is surgically placed in orbit at the time of eye removal. Tissues are closed over the implant, therefore implant will not be seen. Conformer is placed temporarily on top of the tissues covering the implant and under the eyelids. This maintains space for further artificial eye. The artificial eye is fitted 8 weeks after this procedure. If further movement is desired, a hole is placed in the implant and PEG is inserted into it. PEG placement is done only after implant had time to fill with vascular tissues from orbit, usually around 6 months after implantation. Bone scan or MRI is done to confirm if implant has adequate vascular ingrowths. Final result varies, which depends on condition of orbit, muscles and surrounding tissues. There is also a synthetic variant of hydroxyapatite which is available by the trade name of Occupore porous orbital implant. The next major introduction was the porous polyethylene implant. This material was used in craniofacial reconstruction. These implants were porous in nature and had smoother surface. The pore size varies from 150 to 400 microns and is biocompatible. Interconnecting pores allow for fibrovascular growth. Advantages of using polyethylene implants is that unlike hydroxyapatite, they are non-brittle and muscles could be directly sutured to the implant, hence decreasing the need for wrapping material. Synthetic variant of polyethylene implant is known as MedPore. Another emerging implant is the aluminum oxide implant, also referred to as the bioceramic implant, as it is made of ceramic biomaterial similar to that used in orthopedics and dentistry. They are biocompatible, bio-inert, non-toxic, non-allergenic and porous. Advantages of using this implant is that it can be easily inserted into the socket, they do not cling to surrounding tissue, improved connectivity between pores, therefore increased vascularization, easily drilled without crumbling, rapid and complete fibrovascularization, lightweight and allows suturing directly into the implant. This picture shows mesh wrapped, spherical and egg-shaped aluminum oxide implant. Now the easy suture into extraocular muscle is also because of this vinyl mesh wrap which is incorporated into the implant. Expandable implants with osmotically active gel which expand in vivo and stimulate orbital growth were introduced specially for congenital aneuphthalmos. Self-expanding tissue expanders absorb body fluids to 8 times of original volume. They are safe, reliable, well tolerated with controlled expansion rates and types include hemispherical, orbital expanders and pin SETE. Hemispherical socket expander is sutured on the conjunctiva to expand palpebral fissure. The diameters of this expander when they are dry are 6, 8, 9 mm or 11, 14, 18 mm when they are fully hydrated in 30 days. Spherical orbital expanders are surgically placed in the deep orbital cavity and the overlying tissue covered in 2 layers. They are of various sizes and they are used for correcting superior sulcus deformity and stimulation of facial growth. Pin SETE is for residual aneuphthalmos or microphthalmos. They are spherical acrylic implants of increasing size. Coming on to the complications. Complications include exposure of the implant, conjunctival thinning, cyst formation, discharge, pyogenic granuloma formation, migration and extrusion of implant. Serious complications like infection and extrusion may call for implant explantation. Pegging increases chance of infection, irritation and exposure of the implant. This photo shows exposure of PMMA implant. Post-operative complications may develop during the first week following surgery. Early extrusion of implant may occur secondary to orbital hematoma formation and infection, traumatic manipulation of the tissues, placement of too large an implant, thus creating excess tension on Tenon's capsule. The technique of wrapping the orbital implant with fresh or preserved scleral tissue is thought to be a deterrent for extrusion and migration of the implant, and it is a technique used quite frequently with enucleation. The conformer should fit the contour of the socket and fill the depths of the fornices. It should not be removed by the patient as it is designed with drainage holes to allow mucoid discharge to escape and for insertion of post-operative medication. The plastic conformer is left in place for 4 to 6 weeks to reduce edema and maintain the socket contours by stretching the fornices for the prosthetic eye. Sockets are considered to be contracted when the fornices are too small to retain a prosthetic. Causes include congenital, microphthalmos and ophthalmos, enucleation without implant, and because of this absence of stimulus there is bony contraction. This occurs especially in children. Delay in use of conformer. So after enucleation or evisceration, conformer should be fitted immediately. This keeps fornices stretched and prevents fornicial shallowing. Also, it should have multiple holes to allow flushing and drainage of secretions. Trauma. Extensive laceration of lids and orbital tissue loss causes fibrosis and contraction of socket. And injuries associated with acid or alkali can cause fibrosis. Post-radiotherapy, there occurs fibrosis which leads to contracted socket. Infection of socket or implant leads to sloughing of conjunctiva and shortening of fornices. Poor surgical technique like traumatic dissection within socket causes excessive scar tissue formation. Also, multiple socket operations can lead to contracted socket. So, prevention of contracted socket. So, during enucleation, tenons and conjunctiva should be handled with care and sutured separately. Adequate size implant should be used and appropriately wrapped to prevent extrusion. Conformer should be placed immediately in the eye after enucleation, which is replaced by prosthetic eye in 4 to 6 weeks. Radiotherapy, if required, should be used with fractionation of dose. Contracted socket can be graded according to Gopal Krishna classification, where grade 0 is when the socket is lined with healthy conjunctiva and has deep and well-formed fornices. Grade 1 is when socket is characterized by the shallow lower fornix or shelving of the lower fornix. Here, the lower fornix is converted into a downwards sloping shelf which pushes the lower lid down and out, preventing retention of artificial eye. Grade 2 is when socket is characterized by the loss of upper and lower fornices. Grade 3, where there is loss of upper, lower, medial and lateral fornices. Grade 4 is when there is loss of all the fornices and reduction of palpebral aperture in horizontal and vertical dimensions. Grade 5 is, in some cases, there is recurrence of contraction of the socket after repeated trial of reconstruction. Findings of contracted socket includes extensive loss of conjunctival surface, deep cicatrix formation, atrophy of orbital pad and fornix contraction. So, management includes assessment of socket. The area of socket should be assessed, particularly the depth of fornices, especially inferior fornix which has to support prosthesis. Volume of socket is assessed by noting relative depth of socket compared to fellow eye. If there is superior sulcus deformity or presence of ptosis, they may indicate volume loss. Dry or wet socket, we have to see if there is any active discharge from socket, or if the conjunctiva is dry, fibrosed, which means poorly vascularized conjunctiva. Also assess movements of muscles. In eyelid, look for eyelid laxity, entropion or ectropion or symblepharon. and associated bony contraction which can be seen after trauma or post-radiotherapy. So reconstruction of contracted socket require grafts to increase surface area and volume replacement with orbital implants. So since the presentation of contracted socket is variable and management is always tailored to the specific needs of the patient, management of the contracted socket is based on two important clinical findings. The first, severity and location of symblepharon, and the second, amount of residual orbital volume. When there is minimal symblepharon, a Z-plasty or local conjunctival flap can be sufficient to provide room for a prosthesis to fit. Lower lid laxity is managed with horizontal tightening procedures. If there is prolapse of the phonoceal conjunctiva due to anterior migration of the inferior intraorbital fat causing an inadequate inferior cul-de-sac, this can be managed by externalized sutures or conjunctival fixation to the inferior orbital rim periosteum. If the inferior fornix is primarily scarred and the posterior lamella requires lengthening, various grafts including nasal septum, auricular cartilage, sclera, hard palate, or fascia lata can be implanted. While if there is cicatricial entropion with normal phonoceal depth, Weiss procedure can be performed. In case of moderate symblepharon, when there is limited conjunctiva, split thickness mucosal or full thickness conjunctival autografts are used. Mucosal grafts can undergo extensive contraction and result in foul-smelling discharge. Therefore, other materials like AMG or amniotic membrane graft are considered. Amniotic membrane grafts allow for conjunctival epithelial migration. Also, it has been studied that AMG causes significant increase in fornix depth and volume measurements at 12 months of use. They are not associated with mucus discharge, have decreased morbidity, and improved recovery time. However, because amniotic membrane grafts are substrate grafts, they cannot be used when contraction is severe as there are no residual conjunctival epithelial cells to differentiate and migrate. Contracted socket along with volume loss should be approached with DFG or Termes fat graft. The usage of DFG was first popularized by Byron Smith in the late 1970s as a way to supplement volume at the time of enucleation and to preserve the fornices and conjunctiva. They are frequently harvested from the abdominal, gluteal and thigh regions. When the epidermis is properly removed, there is low incidence of cyst formation. The hair follicles and sebaceous glands within the dermis disappear within 1 to 3 months. However, if the epidermis is not meticulously removed from the DFG prior to placing it in the orbit, pilosebaceous units can produce hair and oils in the socket. In children, DFGs can grow as the child ages. This is often desirable but can lead to volume asymmetry or a poorly fitting prosthetic if the growth is excessive. DFG in patients with vascular compromise to donor bed can cause increased risk of fat atrophy and failure. Use of composite hard palate dermis fat grafts or HPDFG to both expand volume and lengthen the posterior lamella is becoming a popular procedure for treating volume loss. Severe contracture is difficult to repair since the contracted sockets have little to no residual conjunctival lining. However, they can be managed with space-occupying alloplastic materials like silicone and polyethylene or conformers fixed to the orbital rim. Now, this conformer tends to push a graft against the posterior orbit recipient bed while counteracting the forces of contraction during scarring. Also, rotational or microvascular free flaps from a variety of locations like retroauricular, superficial temporalis fascia, radial skin, thoracodorsal artery perforator can be used to revascularize the damaged conjunctiva, most importantly in post-radiation or repeat surgery patients, but are difficult to perform. Conformers are usually placed at the time of surgery and may even be sutured in to ensure separation of the posterior lamella of the eyelid from the conjunctival surface and maintain the newly formed fornices. The conformer may be left in for extended periods of time to prevent recontracture of the socket. Several factors predict prognosis of reconstruction procedure. First is the underlying condition which caused the which cause the contracture, which could be autoimmune condition for which the systemic medication should be started to prevent conjunctival scarring, or local infection which needs to be treated first. Second is the degree of contraction and the number of previously performed reconstructions, which has a negative impact on the expected surgical outcomes. Mild to moderate sockets tend to get better with EMG or DFGs, while severely contracted sockets may need repeat or even staged procedures over a period of months to years to allow for full reepithelialization. So this is the end of the presentation, and different types of orbital implants and also classification and management of contracted socket are very frequently asked questions. So please go through previous year question papers and also go through this presentation once again and prepare your notes. Okay, thank you for now.